The next track 2, is implementing your program. Once you have these program documents prepared, signed, then they're ready to go. These documents need to be living documents. If you write a document and you put it on a shelf in a 3-ring binder and you just leave it there and you never look at it, and then 6 years later you think, oh gee, I might need to look at that, then that's not a living document. These documents need to be kept up to date. OSHA actually requires that you have these documents somewhere where they're accessible to your employees. So you don't want to find yourself in a position where they're really out of date. From time to time, they have to be reviewed. And they're reviewed to fit your changing environment. Maybe you have a new operation or a new kind of machine, or you built a new wing onto your building and you're doing something different, or you're doing a different kind of construction, whatever. The documents need to be kept up to date to fit what it is that you're working on. The first bullet I have here is in implementing this program is employee training. You must be able to demonstrate that you have trained your employees to perform their associated or assigned duties safely. OSHA comes to see you, they're going to want to see certain training records, especially for things where there's special requirements like forklifts, hoisting and rigging, trenching, those kind of things. Depending on what you're doing, the day that OSHA comes through your operation, your work site, your building, they will ask to see certain documents showing that certain people have been trained. And as a little story I'll tell about this that happened to me one time, we had an employee who was sick the day we did OSHA training for forklifts. OSHA requires that forklift certification be updated every 3 years. Well, this employee was sick the day that certification was supposed to be updated. And she came back to work a few weeks later, and that recertification did not happen. And lo and behold, one day an OSHA inspector came through the facility, and they were going to pick some people to see if they had their forklift certs. Guess which person they picked? It's one person. This is the person they picked. That employee did not have their forklift certification, and we got assessed a citation and a penalty of about $6,000 because that employee wasn't officially certified. Those are things that have to be kept up to date. Next on our list is record keeping. Just as I mentioned in the example a few moments ago, your training records must be up to date, and they will be available to be reviewed by OSHA. OSHA also has requirements for keeping records of your illnesses and injuries when they're occupationally related. OSHA will come to your facility, if OSHA comes to your facility, they'll want to see your records for record keeping for all occupational injuries and illnesses for the past 3 years. And they're going to look to see if you're following their record keeping requirements. So you need to have training records. These training records need to be easily accessible. And if you have injuries and illnesses, those records need to be accessible as well. And even if you don't have injuries and illnesses that are occupational injuries and illnesses, you still have to have records showing that you didn't have any occupational injuries or illnesses. Next on the list are audits and inspections. Safety programs must be periodically evaluated. As I said very early in this discussion, we're not allowed to be in a position where we have documents that are put on a shelf and left for months and months or years and years and never looked at. They have to be kept up to date. There are some programs, such as the lockout tagout program, where you're required to audit that program annually. And I know the last OSHA audits that I've had, they wanted to see that we had done that. They wanted to see my last audit of the lockout tagout program. In that case, fortunately, I had those records where they were easily accessible, and I gave them to the OSHA inspector, and I never heard another word about it. That's the way you want it to go. They are going to ask you for those things. I think it's just a list of things that they ask for. And as long as you have your PPE written certification, your lockout tagout audit done, and the other things in OSHA that you have to check on annually, as long as you have those, you'll be sitting pretty. If you don't have those, you're going to get a citation. That is the last bullet that we have here on this slide. Maintaining yourself in an audit-ready status. You will not have any evidence, or any advance notice of an OSHA audit. OSHA can come and audit you for a variety of reasons. They can be driving down the street and looking at your construction site and seeing something that they don't think is right and stop and audit your construction site. An employee can file a complaint with OSHA anonymously. They can drop a dime on you, is the way that we refer to it. They can drop a dime on you. Call OSHA and say, these people are unsafe and people are going to get hurt and this is a terrible thing. And the next thing you know, you're going to get either a phone call, a letter, or a visit from OSHA. A lot of times it'll just be a letter, but it depends on what the complaint is and how busy they are. They can just show up unannounced, and I have had that happen. They also have special focus programs every year where there'll be a certain kind of SIC code, and they'll go visit as many of the industries that have a similar SIC code in that area that they can find. At the time I'm making this video, roofing companies are getting a lot of visits from OSHA. They can come because of an injury. At this point, there are certain injuries that have to be reported to OSHA within 24 hours or within a week or within a month, depending on the kind of injury, whether it's a death or whether it's amputation or loss of an eye or a certain kind of injury with a mechanical press. There are certain kind of injuries that have to be reported to OSHA directly, and they can show up because of one of those reports. So there are a lot of ways that OSHA can show up. You need to maintain yourself in a ready situation.